We're just getting through the coldest June that I've ever remembered in my life. I've been working outside for well over 20 years. Most of the jobs I ever worked before I got into tree planting, then I got into farming, were always outside. And so I'm very accustomed to the natural cycles to our weather. And I've been noticing for a number of years, particularly the last 5 or 6 years, that the summers aren't as hot and the winters are colder, longer, and the shoulder seasons are a little bit colder and wetter. And we just had an epic cold June. And as I record this on the 3rd of July, it's still fairly cold. Like, it is not hot. It should be hot summertime by early July here in the Okanagan. And so we're going to talk about this trend that I've been seeing, and guys like my guest today, David Dubane from Adapt 2030, have been talking about for a number of years. I actually discovered his channel a few years ago from people like you guys on the YouTube channel here recommending his channel, and I check him out, and so I did. I've been hooked ever since. He really pieces together a lot of things happening right now, and it's great stuff. We really riff in this conversation. We talk about scenarios or where we think things might go, and it might sound a little myopic at points, but I don't want this to be, this is not fear, right? This is just, let's just look at something for what it is, and we can empower ourselves with that information, and we can do something about it. That's what's the most important thing to keep in mind with this. Not trying to make you fearful, because if we see what's coming, we can know what to do, and we can have a more clear path forward, and we can be empowered by that information. So I hope this is an empowering conversation for you. Enjoy. So David, thanks for joining me here.
Yeah, glad to be here. And, I've been watching your work for years. And, by the way, quick FYI, when I first started learning about microgreens, I found Curtis's channel because I kind of knew what I was doing, sort of. But the way he had it in the greenhouse there, and the way he was laying the trays and put the bricks on top and spraying everything and, putting it under cover, I didn't really do that when I did mine. I just started, threw it on the tray, and then, just kind of sprouted out of the soil. So not only did I double or triple my yields coming out, but they grew much faster because the way that they were supposed to be growing, I was just hoping the seeds would come up in trays. So yeah, really. Yeah. So I learned a lot, and I'm always looking for people that are really good in agriculture that have systems that I want to learn and employ in my own farm that I'm starting up with greenhouses and different techniques, superfoods, and how to keep everything under cover to protect it from the grand solar minimum. So thank you for letting me talk to you today, Curtis.
Yeah, my pleasure. And that's great to hear. And I really appreciate the fact that not only are you talking about this stuff, and you've been talking about this stuff for a while, because I've been watching you for a while. I had a lot of my YouTube viewers tell me to check you out years ago, so I did, and was pretty hooked ever since then, because the things that you were talking about were making sense to the things that I was seeing. As a farmer, we spend a lot of time outside, and I've really noticed these patterns over the last couple of years. I mean, I noticed them 6 years ago, but I've really started to notice them more because they seem to be getting worse. And so one thing I really appreciate about what you're doing is you're talking about it, you're analyzing it, but you're also doing a lot of this stuff yourself. You're actually developing some land, you're putting up greenhouses, you're making stuff happen. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about what you've got going on your land?
Well, there's an enormous amount more rainfall happening in East Tennessee out here now. And I realized now the way to move forward, at least for me, now this is just the way I'm doing it. And I'm having some people, family members and others chip in on some of the costs. So I'm not bearing all the costs myself.
Yeah.
But we decided to put almost everything we're growing under some sort of cover at the moment.
Smart.
Now, that's hoop houses and domes right now.
Yep.
And to find builders is very difficult right now. And here's another thing in the countryside. If you're going to be looking for land, with all this stirring of trouble within the cities, there's an enormous amount of people that want to leave.
Yes.
Now, these people have much more money than I do, and they sell a house in New York City or they sell a house in Connecticut, and they're down here flush with cash, and they're paying over the going rate. They're paying 20-30% more on builders' costs. Hey, come to my house, I'll give you a 30% premium just to come to build for me first. Wow. There's a lack of builders. The land, we've had 2 deals fall through on the land because somebody came and got it up from under us.
Wow.
Yeah, twice. We had a good piece on the river, but then it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because we were thinking if troops or police or whatever, they're going to go through the riverbeds first and they're going to take their boats down the rivers. But that was, directly on It had TVA land right away at the end of the field. It was a 5-acre field. It ended on the river. And we wanted it really bad. We didn't get it. And it was a blessing in disguise. We weren't meant to have it, because looking back now, to think how people are going to be patrolling, or how easy your land is to get to or not get to during these situations. Coming in the middle of the night on a boat, anybody could have rocked up on a small river, next to the land, and jumped off.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And those are considerations to think about right now.
Yeah. I mean, what do you see? And for the agriculture here, it was really cold until much later in the May here. And it's usually not that cold. People have been talking about how cool it was coming into May and even June here. It's been cooler than normal, and especially with the dust storm here in the southeast US, temperatures drop into the mid 70s or low 70s, 60s in the evening. Going into July in the southeast US is unheard of. And then these massive rains that followed all the dust just wiped out everything yesterday, pretty much, that we had planted out back. So
wow. I mean, I've got some good friends in Western Tennessee, and I've been coming down there for 3 or 4 years in a row. Obviously not this year.
Yeah, you were running courses.
I was doing courses down there, and down at Rose Creek Farm, they're just an hour and a half out of Memphis, and yeah, it's wet, right? And so one thing they've realized, and this is, I would say, a large majority of growers that I know that are in the southeastern region of the U.S., maybe say Florida, have just realized putting poly over your entire farm is just far more practical. And it's not for the reason that we would do it up here in Canada, right? It's not to keep frost off and get more heat units on the soil. It's to keep rain off, right? Is that you get hammered with rain, and just makes sense. And so I was talking to Ray at Rose Creek Farms not too long ago, and they tripled their income on their farm. So they essentially tripled their productivity by putting the entire farm in caterpillar tunnels. So basically a 14-foot wide by 100-foot tunnel on every single bed on their farm, which is, it's a half acre, not a huge farm, but they tripled their production because of that. So this is something that people got to think about. When I talk about the grand solar minimum, and people say, well, what do we do about that? And it's funny because some people I know in the farming community still really buy into the mainstream climate change narrative, which is not this, but this is a climate change, right? Climate is changing. People always say, what's the best way to solve climate change for farmers? And I just say, get greenhouses, because pretty much across the board, that's what it is.
Well, if you follow the grand solar minimums through the last, say, 10 of them, they occur on about 400-year cycles. And another thing that you can go back in history and find the Chinese dynasties, they never last longer than 400 years. And you have to ask yourself why, because, they were at the apex of their power and innovation and agriculture and invention at that time too, and military. But they would always collapse. And, nobody goes quietly in the night. And if you go further back, into some of these older type of civilizations, the Hittites, Sumerians, the Aksum, you keep going further back in history and you keep finding the same thing. They all collapse on the same kind of time frame. But knowing that each successive sets of years, the weather gets more intense. Now, where you live, if it's snow, you're going to get much, 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 much more snow than you do.
Yes. Yeah.
If you get rain, you're going to get an enormous amount. We had 3.5 to 4 inches of rain come down in 12 hours yesterday here.
Wow.
Yeah. It cut water channels through the grass in the front yard.
Wow.
Never saw anything like this before. And knowing that it's going to get more intense. Okay. You can gripe about it, or you can accept it and find the change that you need to do to move forward in it. So one of the changes is putting everything under cover, and then also having a drainage bed. So if you're on a hillside, like we're on the land where you have is 950 feet at the bottom where the fields are, then it rises up to about 1,200 and some feet, 1,207, somewhere in there on the topography map. But once that rain's coming like that, it's coming down in the drainage on the mountain. So you need to find out in turn, where's that going to drain to? Because you don't want to put up all your greenhouse, have all the infrastructure, and then you get this storm like we did yesterday, and then that goes right through the middle of all of that you tunneled in there. You'd be totally wiped out.
Yeah.
So knowing that things are going to increase to the once in a 500-year flood, once in a 1,000-year event, as just guaranteed it's coming. In my personal opinion, you can do your own research and see if you agree or not, but I firmly believe it is. So I'm preparing for that. So I'm looking for what 500-year flood mark is, where, you know, insurance companies have all this information. Once in a 1,000-year flood, once in a 500-year flood mark. If you're going to build a home, you can't be near those, but use that same gauge to help you place your infrastructure for growing food that insurance companies require for you in order to build a house, that you have to be a certain number of feet back, certain number of height, or certain number of feet in height above. So just, you know, get their parameters and then build that into what you're going to do for the food. Because I think the food's going to be more important than the house, because the house can be replaced, but your crop that you grew for 3 or 4 months, that's going to keep you alive. If that gets wiped out, that's a serious problem. Well, I do want to point something out here. And, you know, regardless if you're on the global warming CO2 narrative side, or if you're on the, you know, natural causation change, you know, and natural variability, if you're on either side, it doesn't matter. The climate's changing. See, that's where they get us to fight each other.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. I am the biggest believer in climate change, to the point I spent my entire life for the last 5 years plus putting this information together to get myself ready so I could understand it and help others kind of understand this too, because we're in it together. We have to work together.
Absolutely.
You're not going to live by yourself out there and get through this in the next decade and a half or 2 decades of this whole transition point. We're going to need communities built on top of people that have skill sets, that understand the changes, so you can kind of forecast out what you might need to build to prevent the damage to the crops and whatnot. And we need to work together, our skill sets. We need to come together as a community to get through this, not an individual.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you believe it's CO2 or whether you believe it's natural variability, everybody's been talking about the ice loss on Greenland. And that was like kind of the poster child for this CO2 global warming thing. But if you haven't noticed, and I know it didn't make the news very much, through May and through June, it had the highest amount of ice ever recorded gained in those months since we began keeping records about Greenland ice. Wow. Now, it's tapered off back to the 30-year average from, say, 1981 to 2010. But I just am still baffled and dumbfounded by, why did the media not jump for joy? And why aren't we all clapping our hands and, you know, jumping in the air, screaming, you know, cheers of praise and thanks? Because the ice came back. Record ice growth, so far above anything that's ever recorded. You didn't hear a peep about it in the media. And I don't know why they didn't run with the story unless it's a narrative. And see, these are the things that I started to question in the beginning. And if you're out there and you believe in the CO2 thing, great. That's what you've been taught. And maybe that's all you know. Great, but go with it. Why did they, you should start asking the questions too. Why did they not report on the massive, massive record ice gains in May and June coming into the warm time? You know, because they always say when it gets warm, the ice is going to melt, the ice is going to melt. Well, they had massive gains. Nobody talks about it. And all these snow, and, you know, Curtis, can you talk a little bit about what you saw out there? Because I'd reported a few times on snows and anomalous cold in June out west where you are, British Columbia, and it's snowing today in Idaho, Montana, further out there.
Oh yeah, well we had just this month in June, there was one day which beat an all-time record for cold, and never recorded so cold. June is typically a rainy month, but it's still summer. You know, like especially once we get into the second week of June here, we get rain. June's actually, it's quite a lovely month typically. It's what a lot of people would see on the eastern seaboard, the northeastern seaboard in the US, where you get really nice mixed weather, and it's great crop growing weather because it's rainy and then the sun comes out and then your crops will explode because they got rain and then they get sun, and it's amazing. But it's just been relentless rain here and really, really cold. I've had problems in my garden this year that I've never seen before. I've seen pests that I've never seen before, and I mostly attribute that to just wet and cold soil that can't grow. So I'm noticing it here as a guy who spends a lot of time outside. I'm noticing it every single day.
And I think if you talk to somebody in every continent, they would have a similar story. Because I know with Australia, for example, it's been really cold early there, and they've had a lot of snow in New Zealand as well, far beyond the norms. And again, the media in Australia been saying that it's going to get hotter and hotter, yet they've had record cold, record snow so early before the winter even started. And I would say that not because I can just read the news. It's because I know people down there that actually write me and talk to me about what they're seeing. Mm-hmm. Snow areas opening early and skiing getting an early start and these kind of things were not supposed to happen. And so the whole thing about this grand solar minimum is, if you go back through history and ancient history, most civilizations and cultures worship the sun as a life giver. So if you look at climate change in two different ways, you can look at it the structured way that we've been fed for 40 years of its CO2, and the more CO2 goes up, the warmer it gets. Or you can look at it as the sun that drives everything, because the sun's been talked about, worshiped, revered, sacrificed for, and so many things through what the last 12,000 years of this kind of interglacial we're in right now. So that really trumps 30 years of some narrative of CO2. And the thing that really is the nail in the coffin for me now is the whole COVID thing. We had almost no planes, no ships, no factories, no cars, no trucks. Everything's been grounded and nothing, but the CO2 kept rising and rising through those 4 months. It dipped such a small smidgen that it's almost unnoticeable. Well, if that were true, even if there's a lag effect, we should have seen some giant dip if we were truly the cause of it. So there's been a lot of massive volcanic eruptions during this time, which would definitely add to the CO2 levels in the atmosphere. Oceans, I'm sure they're, sending out an enormous amount as well. But what about the sun? What's the sun doing? Because the sun goes in the cycle of that 11-year cycle, which we're in the solar minimum right now. And you always know about this when you hear about it. It's 11 years on the cycle. Well, that in turn also has larger cycles too. So if you do 36 of the 11-year cycles, you come into one of these grander cycles, if you will, this grand solar minimum. And then those in turn, those 400-year cycles, 9 of those makes like a Bray cycle. And we come into these longer durations of time, 3,600 years. And you start to get into these more 4,000, 4,500 years. And you can start to get into these much longer time frames. But think of it like a Swiss watch. When you open up, you have little tiny gears, and there's a little bit, medium-sized gears, larger gears for the hour hand, etc. Well, think about these as cosmological cycles driven by the sun and how that affects our Earth and the climate, the jet streams, and the cloud cells. So if you can map it out, and it's mathematically pretty good on the 11-year cycle, if you start to see that those couple up into bigger cycles, then they should be pretty mappable as well. Because NASA does the forecast out, and the European Space Agency, they go out 11 years, and they're pretty good at telling you when the next solar minimum or solar maximum is going to happen within a year or two. They're pretty good at that. But now, why shouldn't they be just as good as telling you within a year or maybe 5? I'll give them 5 years of a 400-year cycle taking effect here. So that's where we're at right now. And my personal belief is we're at the 400-year cycle. All the things you're seeing in the media right now are to distract you, because if you knew what's going to happen with the food, you would have a different take on what the politicians have done and how we've been led down this road of dividing us, so we're not working together to overcome these problems. And I think we need to start entirely new discussions on, I don't even care if you want to talk about how the climate's moving. We're here now. It doesn't really matter how we got here. We're here.
Yeah.
It's forecastable through the sun, but we really need to start working together. And all I'm seeing in the media is divide and divide more and divide into another segment. But we need to come back together again and again to a cohesive unit and start working our skill sets together. And you're not going to survive it alone. That's the whole thing. We're going to have to come and we're going to think of new solutions to grow food, new taxation schemes for economic growth, if you will. We're going to have to reinvent new industries. I mean, it's a huge, huge opportunity for so many if we just look in the right direction over there.
So why do you, like, the thing that was a very powerful statement, and it really gives more fuel to the fire for, I mean, even for myself to be prepared, which I've been doing for a number of years. But do you, in your opinion, and I don't know if you could prove this, if I asked you to make a guess as to why the media, let's call it the establishment for lack of a better word, because they seem to be quite united, the government and the media, the powers that be seem to be quite united on this front. Why? I mean, there's a lot of smart people up there, right? They're not just a bunch of idiots. You know, people like to criticize anybody who's doing something they don't like as idiots. I don't believe that. I believe there's a lot of smart people there. Let's say that they know this information that you have expressed. Why do they want to make people divided? Do you think that they, like, what's your opinion of it? Do they want to see an absolute collapse?
Personal opinion, the way the system of debt creating wealth on our planet and those people to stay in power, the system's run to its end. You know, this COVID didn't really create the financial crisis. It was already dead on arrival anyway. When
Absolutely.
you saw that repo market is when, you know, banks were lending to banks, or ETFs were, getting money from banks, and they started not to trust each other. Bond issuance and persons that are in the bond market, they didn't trust. So there was a whole non-trust issue between banks even paying other banks back, let alone ETFs and other traders and hedge funds and all these things. That's why the interest rates for overnight lending went so high last year, and that's really what broke the market. So it was already completely shattered, and there was no more debt growth. Like, if you're going to stay in power and you're going to have a debt-based economy that needs more debt and more debt and more debt to keep going and going, all right, we have the 8 billion people. 50% of them will never get the kind of debt that they need to continue this system up. We've saturated it on the end to, what are they at, negative interest rates now. The only possible thing to make money now is the collapse and the resurgence, reemergence. And at the same time, there's going to be a few less people because there just won't be enough food. Now, see, I only say that at the present way we produce food.
Yeah.
If we were in a different system, I guarantee there'd be enough for probably double the world population. But the way we're doing it now and the structure it is with this wealth, with the money, you either have it or you don't, and people starve and they shouldn't. Because there's more than, nature is so bountiful. And Curtis, you know that. I mean, how bountiful is nature? Nature never stops providing.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
that's right.
I think it's on purpose to divide us because they need to reset and restart an entirely new system where these powers that be that you talk of want to remain in power. But the only way they can remain in power is to collapse the system with a demolition, controlled demolition that they're in control of. So then the new replacement will probably be a cryptocurrency based, maybe metals, maybe assets, where they were talking about nationalizing all national assets in a country as like a natural resource coin or something like this.
Yeah.
To reset the system, to start at zero again so we can rebuild everything based on debt again. It's just like a recycled 2.0 thing.
Yeah.
But you have to control the collapse and you have to keep people divided, because if we come together as a human race, imagine how powerful our thoughts are. We could just say, we don't need the system anymore. We got 500 guys here like Curtis that know everything about farming. We're just going to go off and grow our own food for an entire state, and we don't need you all anymore. That's what they don't want, because you're going to break away from the system. We could get our own clean water because we could drill our wells.
Yeah.
We could grow an enormous amount of food. People know how to do animal husbandry. There's iron workers out there. People know how to do blacksmithing. There's doctors that would join these, communities and whatnot. And I'm not talking a utopian dude, everybody share.
Right.
That's not at all. You'd have to trade value for value.
Yeah. That's super important. Man, it's
But that's just my opinion, though. I mean, sometimes I go on wild tangents and think, I'm trying to connect the economic collapse with this grand solar minimum, because it happens every grand solar minimum. The economy collapses because the food prices get too high. People revolt. There's governmental change, and it's just cycle and repeat, recycle and repeat, and cycle and repeat. I'm sorry I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Here's a quick question for you, because I would like to see if we could.
The size of the sun would be the number one to start with, I think. The size of the sun, so people can really understand how big that thing is electromagnetically off to the left over there compared to our Earth size. See, that's the whole key to understanding it, I think.
Right. So what do you say, just real quick, because I see people that kind of troll my comments and everything, and it's just kind of funny. But I get it. What do you say to people that just say, well, NASA's just this shill organization and you can't trust anything that they say? What do you say to that?
Well, I could say, like, the human race, there's good and there's bad in it. Just to say the entire human race is bad, or, they do have some real instruments up that are measuring, that can be verified by others that aren't in NASA, that have their own equipment that look out at the planets or look at the sun, or have electromagnetic spectral analysis from their own. There's a lot of armchair people in astronomy now. You don't have to be with an organization anymore. And then, you can't tell me that there's 13,000 people with telescopes independently that are all on the same page to lie to you about something. I just can't believe that. I can't believe it. Yeah, because you have to realize that the sun has these magnetic field lines coming out of it, just like we do. We have that North Pole and then we have a South Pole on the Earth. And that's how those northern lights or southern lights come in. They follow those field lines down. So they're following the magnetic field line down right into the top of our planet. Mm-hmm. And if it's super, super intense, it'll come to the side of the planet. So that's what you're looking at there. This magnetosphere is our Earth's magnetic field shielding, and it matches what the sun does. So if the sun is super active, our magnetosphere is going to be really tight and very, very strong, protecting us from cosmic rays, which cause more cloud cover, by the way. Mm-hmm. Heinrich Svensmark's the one you want to go see for that. He has this great movie called The Cloud Mystery. It's free. You can check it out on YouTube. He had the same thing, you know. He had all this analysis and research showing that cosmic rays build more clouds, and because we're going to have more cosmic rays, and that's the true cause for the rain, not the evaporating oceans that the global warming side wanted to push. They pulled all of his funding, and then they took away his research lab. So he had to go get independent funding and then test off-site to still prove it. And then once he proved all of his calculations were correct and cosmic rays really did, and they could no longer hide the information. They're like, "Oh, Heinrich, welcome back. Please come back to our," and he was like, "No, I'll stay over here and create my own lab. Thanks."
Wow.
But the weaker that magnetosphere goes, the more cosmic rays come in. And this is the reason for a lot of really heavy rains that we're seeing right now. And knowing that, our sun is going to go lower and lower and lower all the way through, say, 2032 or so. We would expect, through historical precedent, that there would be more cosmic rays increasing, which is going to create more floods because it seems to happen every single time. So if I'm a guy who's going to want to protect my food, I'm going to know there's going to be way, way heavier rains. So what can you do if you know there's going to be heavier rain and heavier wind? What are you going to do to protect it? So for me, this is the key to a lot of geopolitics right now. I try to call it agri-politics, like agriculture and politics, agri-politics. Because this area in Central Africa going up to North Africa there is going to be the most important piece of real estate moving forward for the next 20 years.
Really?
Yeah, because you see how the blue, it's getting bluer on the bottom chart there. That's when the West African monsoon shifts and it creates more moisture. And the Chinese are growing a 100 square mile area down there using water from the Nubian aquifer that they've drilled a bunch of wells. And then since there's more above ground rainfall too, they can couple that. So you have to have both. You can't just use well water. You need some above ground water too from rainfall. So it seems that this is on a multi-thousand-year cycle on a shift, on this West African monsoon shift, which leads precedent to why the Aksum, why were they there? And they dominated that area, and then it got really dry and they had to leave. So after the Roman collapse, you know, they debased their currency. And this is another, again, we're just going to cycle and repeat. They debased their currency. The Romans, they put lead in their coins and they put tin when it should have been silver. And eventually the coins were worth nothing. So the Aksum came and they had a standardized weight and measure system for silver and gold coinage. So everybody started to use their coins because they were the true weight and measure. Like it said, like 12 grams of gold, it was 12 grams of gold. Not even a tenth of a gram less or anything. It was 100% what they said it was.
Yeah.
But why did they take over from the Romans? What happened to the Romans? Why weren't the Romans still around? They collapsed because they couldn't grow food. Think about this. So what you're looking at here is the longer term cycle. So each one of those little boxes is a 400-year grand solar minimum. Those black boxes that you're seeing are black.
Okay, up in here, yeah.
So think about that. The duration between them, and there's heavy, they call it like a super grand solar minimum when you have really intense, heavy grand solar minimums. I think we're going into one of those. And between those, you have the lighter ones, which would be something like the Maunder minimum, which was still incredibly devastating for our societies. Because if we're going to repeat something on a 2,000-year cycle, can you imagine? See, you might answer some of your own questions is how would governments try to protect themselves to get through these changes on a 2,000-year climate cycle shift? They would want to come out on top of power too. So they're going to do a lot.
It's an opportunity. I mean, to me, it's interesting because it almost seems to line up with a bunch of things. One that I've seen ever since I've been starting to pay attention to things is that the mechanism of war doesn't really work in the same way. People just all over the world are so tired of the war machine. It's hard to get the US involved in war, so they do it in proxy wars, you know, like with Obama. You know, you go and you bomb people with drones and you do these sort of proxy wars, you support insurgencies. They've and the US has done that for a long time, but there hasn't really been any blatant warmongering from the US after George Bush. It was all kind of done with proxy wars. And so this whole thing seems to me like there is an opportunity to come out on top. And you saw it with sort of the war narrative, just like with climate change. People weren't really buying into the mainstream climate change narrative. At least that's my perspective. That's why they have to keep hammering it, because people weren't buying it. But they'd say, we need warlike measures. We need warlike measures. That wasn't really working. And then the COVID thing came along. Now we need warlike measures to get it. this whole thing with the grand solar minimum is happening, and so they can create more warlike measures to keep people distracted, keep their eyes off the prize, also thin out the population, which seems like something that they would like to do anyways. And they can consolidate their power because everybody's continuously fighting with one another. And the scary thing about this, though, David, is that if things get really hairy, I mean, there are geopolitics right now it's absolutely insane. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen. It's insane right now with what's going on, the whole divide and conquer thing, as you were talking about. When this starts to play out further, that's just going to add fuel to the fire. I mean, once people don't have food, man, I mean, if we think we're in trouble now, people in the cities that are fighting with each other over the Black Lives Matter issues or whatnot, now there's no food coming into the city, and it's the middle of winter. Scary.
Does take it to a whole new level, because just in all seriousness now, the agitation that's going on now, there's a lot of political things, there's a lot of things in the society that have been boiling for, centuries and centuries, and it's all seemed to come into a head now. Don't know if it's electromagnetic changes in the sun that are changing the way we perceive reality, because we as human beings, we're electromagnetic antenna as well. So if the sun changes, our earth changes, but we also change because we're receivers of the same electromagnetic energies through this. We're not sitting on top disconnected from the earth. That's why when you walk with bare feet, what happens, because you're all connected into that whole system. So if the sun steps down, the earth steps down, well, our hemispheres of our brain are going to behave a little differently electromagnetically as well. So it always seems that going back in history, there's huge changes politically right now in these grand solar minimums. Now we have the social media and things can be organized, but you got to realize 1600s, 1200 AD, 800 AD, they sure didn't have the organizational capacity to like put out all the propaganda and get everybody to do all these things. It just happened naturally back then too. So I don't know if it's the causation of the sun doing something, or if people are just agitated because they lost their jobs, they don't have any way to make a living, and at the same time the food's unavailable. So if you think that the violence in the cities is high now, that is nothing. I mean, nothing comparatively to that woman or that man's family's children are going to starve to death if they don't steal your food out of your house.
Yep.
That's where it's going to go in the cities. That's why I'm such a fan of, get out in the countryside and start meeting the neighbors around you, form your groups, get your communities. So if people come in, okay, so my property is 37 acres. It's 20 in the front, the whole forest part. We haven't even really done much, because then it's borders on 4,500 acres behind that. And all the neighbors in front of us have field and forest too. So there's a little network of logging trails back through. So if anybody was going to come run in, we'd probably just lock everything up and then bail in the forest and be able to, avoid them for a little while. And then they're not going to search around too long. They're just going to be hit and miss kind of opportunists. And if they can't get in, if they're too weak, they can't really break containers open to get in and stuff, they're going to move on to an easier target. And once they leave, then you come back and you can kind of avoid some of the, this whole scenario of having to, sit somewhere and, pick people off on your roof or side. Just not into that. I think there's other ways to still stay safe and not have to engage in such, to further that whole loss of the human number on the planet. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some very desperate people that will do anything to stay alive, because hunger is the biggest driver. And here's the next thing, for you moving forward to be able to access a supermarket, and there's more and more and more of these images and these stories coming out about this thing called a COVID passport, where you're going to have to do a monthly test, So after you do the test, they're going to do something, I don't know, it's like a RFID tracker. It goes on your phone and your thing's green. And as you march through like the second week, it'll start to turn a little bit orangish or yellow. And then after that last few days, it turns red, which signifies you need to get a new test. If it's red, they won't let you in public transport. They won't let you in supermarkets. They won't let you in stores. So 15 countries have signed on to this, and that was only in the last 2 days. How scary is that? So insane. My thing is, who's going to pay for that? Yeah, they're going to require you to do it monthly to be able to get the passport, and actually literally to get on an airplane. That's why they're more talking about it. What if you can't get you access? Like, that's the thing. If you can control the food, you can control everybody
Yeah,
that has no
absolutely.
access to food or knows how to grow food. And water's even another whole thing, man. Can you imagine if I could control your water?
Absolutely. Scary.
How's your well water out there too? What are you doing for water out on the properties?
Well, on the property I live on right now, we're on the city water.
Oh yeah, right in town there. Yeah,
We
or in the
filter the
suburb.
hell out of it, but yeah, for the properties I've been looking at, that's the biggest thing for me. I mean, there's two, kind of a list of negotiables and non-negotiables, and the non-negotiables are high and dry, but also
Mm.
close to a water source. Um, because we need to build an off-grid property. We want to be completely off the grid, and so those are things that I won't compromise. We're very fortunate. This region that I live in is very good. We have a lot of water around here. It's, part of the reason I moved back to the Okanagan 12 years ago was it had a lot of things happening for it. I wasn't switched on to grand solar minimums or anything like that at that time, but I did see changes coming, and that's why I got out of the city. I was in Montreal, a city with 4 million people or something, and I lived through my first freezing rainstorm. I don't know. Have you ever experienced a freezing rainstorm?
Yeah, when I went to university up in Ohio.
Okay. Because I mean, it is a weather anomaly that not a lot of people experience. That is absolutely terrifying. And the first time I saw this in Montreal, I was in shock. A warm. It's cold as hell up there, right? -30 Celsius, and then warm front comes in, and it rains when it's that cold, and then the rain freezes on impact, but it coats everything with a layer of ice. So you've got sidewalks, roads that are sheets of ice, like an ice rink, and people can't even walk
Okay.
because you're sliding around everywhere. And it was so shocking when I first saw it. It was like pandemonium on the streets. I was laughing because it was so ridiculous, and it was kind of comical to just see people walking out of their homes and they're falling on their asses everywhere. It was insane. But and I'd lived through a number of them, but the worst one, it was so bad that my door to my home was frozen shut and I couldn't get out. So
You get the hair dryer in the back there. This is just
yeah, and that's literally what I did. I did that on the windowsill, and I could eventually get my window open, and I could get out of the house. And then I go outside, and it's just complete pandemonium. And it was the first time, and this is the exact moment that motivated me to leave the city and get into farming, is that when I went to go get groceries, because I spent a good day and a half inside the home, I never left during all this because it was just crazy outside, too cold, rainy. I go to the grocery store, and there's a significant amount less stuff on the shelves. And that's when I realized, man, our food system is very fragile. And not only just the food system, the whole system of centralization, living in a city, packing a bunch of people in one area, trucks coming in on a few main veins to bring in products. What happens when they can't come in? And I saw that in Montreal, and that's what woke me up. And it was that moment that motivated me to get into farming. And we're going to see more of that.
well, you're starting to see it already when people are protesting whatever movement that they deem is unequal in our society. It doesn't matter. There's dozens to choose from. They blocked off roads this time, and they were really successful at it. So sieges of cities are nothing new. That's the norm in warfare. Through the centuries, through the millennia, the siege was the number one thing they did. They put a ring around it, no food in or out. Now you're going to have to surrender.
Yeah,
So
attrition.
I don't know how long it's going to take before whoever's out there realizes that if they block off every single major artery coming in for food, they could starve out a city. Although they'd probably be starving out some of their own family members, and they'd be starving themselves out because they wouldn't have access to food
Yeah,
unless they got a whole bunch of food in some warehouses outside the perimeter zone. But that ice storm too, that's gonna bring down your fruit trees. If you're counting on fruit and food, that ice is gonna fruit trees just don't hang on that stuff. Limbs amok,
oh,
everything
it's
falls down in that stuff.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Decentralized food production. So we talk about decentralized economies, and there's all this decentralization and sharing economy, decentralization in the cryptocurrency aspect as well, where you don't have to go through a central authority to get access to your money as long as you have your private keys, whatnot. But decentralized food production too is the way to go.
absolutely.
Yeah, it has to be, because I could grow something that you don't grow, and then we could share and trade and barter, and then the whole community around us needs to come as a smaller community that doesn't rely so much on the outside world, can provide almost all the basics for itself. And then if you really need something like a chainsaw, because I don't know how many people manufacture chainsaws in their backyard, that's a difficult thing to put together.
Yeah.
Then you could go use your barterable thing, get money, and then go buy that item. Otherwise, everything else should be as close to home as you can get it, because we're about a mile, a little over a mile from an Amish community. Now it's not that big, but still, it's you see them in the horse and buggies, and they're living old style. They don't have the electricity, and they still do everything the old
Well,
way. They mill their own grains. They do everything.
yeah. Well, there's so much we can learn from those people, because when the
Yeah,
lights go
truly.
out, it's not going to be any different than a normal day for them. It's that's the thing that's very interesting and a little bit scary about where this all could go, is that North Americans and Western Europeans and anybody in these kind of first world countries have become so comfortable with all of these conveniences becoming available with the flip of a switch or the click of a button. And when the time comes that those are no longer available, like you take it for granted that the toilet flushes every time. And you don't really appreciate the toilet flushes until the time you go to flush it and it doesn't flush.
Then you have a huge problem. And that's one of the biggest things that's going to make you sick, is not being able to get rid of your waste or treat your waste properly. So, having food and water is one thing, but your hygiene is going to take you down way before you ever run out of your food. For sure. You're going to get sick well before you ever run out of food or water, I believe.
Man, it's amazing when you start to think about all these things and how they how important they are. Man, it's so huge, David, that what hope do you have that people can turn this around? And I'm not talking about for the masses, because I think we all know where that's going to go. But where do you see pockets of hope that people can flip this around for the better?
That people are now really understanding that they're going out and seeking these pieces of land to get out away from the cities. There's a gold rush going out to countryside land right now. It's a seller's market for countryside land at the moment. Just that aspect of so many people wanting to get out of there means they've already changed their mind, that something back there has totally changed to the point where they're willing to cut the entire thing that kept them in those cities away, because it's no longer viable.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of people, they literally changed their mindset. And I think that's the first thing, because if they change their mindset for that, then the mindset can be changed for other things moving along, like cooperation, being able to be more self-sufficient. And the hope for me is, I know how to grow some of my own food, by no means all. I'm trying to do the more natural walk through food forest, where things that are growing, there's just blueberry bushes out there, and blackberries. What else we got? Some mulberries out there. So trying to cut around those to give them more space, because those plants chose to grow there by themselves. I didn't put them there. They were already there.
Okay.
So try to cut around it so they can expand and expand, and make a wild walk through fruit forest, instead of taking it into the agricultural aspect where we put things in beds, like what's around you. And I wouldn't say natural foraging so much, but making the environment around you grow better when there's a food source right there. Make it 3-4 times bigger.
Yeah.
And knowing that I have at least that skill, and I can get to some water, and I have neighbors that are thinking sort of the same way I am in terms of protection, social norms, maybe religious beliefs, just the commonsensical way of thinking about life, what consider norms or your morals are. We're kind of all on the same page. And once you have that, and you're also thinking about self-sufficiency and more, decentralized food production, and then those people that know others around that are thinking the same around the community. So that's the hope, that there's really a lot of people change their minds already to go out into the countryside to get away. So watch the resurgence of small towns. You're going to start reading magazine articles like the coolest little small town. That's because there's a lot of people who went there that have reinvigorated the area and made it into this most incredible, when nature is being taken care of, it gives out this really cool vibe and special energies around those places, when, you know what I mean? It's hard to explain it.
No, I do know what you mean. And that's so in your opinion, with all you know about, you've been talking about this stuff for 5 years. Does this whole grand solar minimum in how you're executing things in your life right now, and when you look at the big picture, is this the big thing to look for over worrying about what the next government lockdown thing is going to be? What's the next thing they're going to demand? Is this the big thing for you?
Yeah, everything else is a distraction.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is, and who cares if the government literally changes during the time you're out in the countryside growing your food, as long as you're more away from the cities, those new change of government, whatever it does, maybe the US breaks into smaller regional areas, doesn't really matter. As long as you're focused on your day-to-day, staying alive, until that thing is right in front of you, like right here, you shouldn't be worried too much about it, because you got to realize the big cities are going to be the first things that focused on. Now, if you see New York go down and Chicago down, Atlanta's going down, and then LA, and you're like, whoa, there's some serious things that just changed there. At that point, everybody's going to be more aware and just be a little more heightened in the awareness. But everything you see coming down from this point forward, and I've tried to describe it like this, it has to become more Hollywood-esque, because the shock factor wears off that much faster. Like, they bring you up much faster, like the adrenaline, like rush, like, oh, everybody's gonna die from COVID, and now there's nothing happened, and it's back to zero again almost. And now they're trying to say 2.0 for some reason, and people aren't gonna buy it. So they're gonna have to shift to a hybrid of something to get you to the next super gigantic Hollywood-esque distraction.
Right.
Because you won't keep buying it again and again and again. You know, they can only tease you for so much longer.
Yeah.
But in your opinion, do you think we can grow enough food? Because you have much more experience than myself on that end. I mean, you produce an enormous amount of food, and you made a business out of it, and and you got training classes, and you got all these things going on well above the average. You're just so far above. Jeez. So what do you think about the possibility of people coming together in smaller communities to be able to really grow enough that they don't have to go to supermarkets for what we consider supermarkets today? I'm not talking about hair dryers or a chainsaw. I'm talking about really the same stuff that you would grow, eat, and produce. Like, we can do chickens. Obviously, we can get our own eggs and go from there. So what's the feasibility of it being able to really grow and produce everything you need except for the real hard stuff that needs to be manufactured in a factory?
Well, I guess it depends. The big depends there is the timeline. If we said, okay, so well, first let me ask you this. You said we're in this cycle now. How far are we into this? And when will we go out of the grand solar minimum and start to go back to warmer weather?
There's two waves. The first wave is going to culminate in 2024. And the second wave will culminate around 2028, but that'll be a much heavier, more powerful wave than we're about to experience in 2024. And another thing for you to take a look at as we come into 2024, the gas giants, you know, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, the ones further out in the solar system, they're going to line up into a perfect square out in one quadrant of the solar system just off from the Earth over there. And they're going to create their own slight, and I would say slight, magnetic field combined in amongst themselves. And then we have the sun over here, and we're going to get squeezed and pulled right in the middle.
Yeah.
And I think you even have a slide on there.
Which one is it? Not this.
That's the Wheeler drought clock. Again, the droughts that come on cycles, they're forecastable. It depends on the intensity of it. And, you know, a lot of these things that we see inside that's a great example there. Now, where's the Earth there?
Yeah.
It's so small you can barely even see it. If that was truly to scale, the Earth would be smaller than like even the tiniest point of you putting a pin into a piece of paper. It would be so small you wouldn't be able to see it. And then people say, "Oh, then sun doesn't affect anything." Well,
so, what were you going to say about what was happening with the Earth?
So, if you have those four gas giants there, they're great. When you got the Jupiter and Saturn, those are unignited stars anyway. Basically, the brown dwarfs, but they rotate around us. So you have those four there: Uranus, Neptune, Saturn. They're going to be in a perfect square out there, and they're going to create their own slight magnetic field. The way they've lined up out there, they're going to be pinging off themselves because they're going to be the closest they ever get in an orbit after it spins for 2,000 years. This is the closest they ever get. The last time they got
2024, that's where that's going to happen in 2024. Yeah,
2024. Last time this orbit happened where they got that close and made that perfect square out there was 79 AD. We're talking about a repeating cycle here of a 2,000 year, at least just the way the planets are lining up in 2024.
Wow.
So the sun will be over here on, let's say, where it's at there, and the other four gas giants will be over here, and Earth's going to be sandwiched between them. So we're going to get two magnetic tugging forces on us. Now here's the conjecture. Now this is an unknown, and I just don't know myself. So I'm throwing it out there. Maybe somebody knows the answer. Do your own research. We're either going to get tugged out a little bit further from the sun, so our winters will be extremely cold in the northern hemisphere, and the crust is going to get tugged at some point. So there'll be more volcanic eruptions, more earthquakes, and we might get pulled further out. So that's the unknown. Will we get really pulled further out from the orbit by maybe 500,000 to 700,000 miles? Not sure. And the same would be true on the inverse when we come around. Then we have the sun, all the four gas giants, and us, and we get pulled slightly in. So the weather extremes during these times coming in from 2023 and 24 are going to be so far beyond what you can expect for. Yeah, there it is. That's it right there.
Yep. Yep.
So you see the sun, and you have the four gas giants out there. The Earth's going to be right in the middle of that. I call it the magnetic sandwich, the Earth sandwich there.
Yeah.
Earth magnetic sandwich. Now, see, that'll be on the wintertime side, what you're looking at there, where the Earth is in the middle of between the four gas giants and the sun. Now, when the Earth spins around in the summertime for us in the northern hemisphere, we're going to get pulled closer into the sun by a little bit. So the heat will be extreme in the summer, and then the winters will be extreme because we'll be further out in the orbit like this. So nobody's sure how close or how far we're going to be tugged in terms of miles further out than the regular orbital blah. But I mean, we changed slightly over that they call it eccentricity. I mean, it changes over time anyway. But this is going to be an extreme, super fast 3 or 4 year event max before everything uncouples after 2025 and 6, somewhere in there. And then it'll line up and we'll get something that's similar in 2028, and it'll all be totally done by 2035-ish.
Where we start to get back to.
Yeah, we'll start to get back to normal again.
Wow. So,
but it's really interesting how all these political things are happening right now when we're lining up for this first alignment here coming up in 2023 and 24. I thought none of this political stuff for locking the planet down and economic stuff would happen until next year. So whatever's happening is happening far faster than our timelines were initially calling this. Or maybe we're just naive and we thought they would take longer because they wouldn't be that organized, that they would, do something a little bit closer in versus where we are now. We're still, 4 years out from what you saw in those diagrams, where we thought, they would do it like 2 years in and out because they would want to string the economy as long, because you got to realize all this fake money printing and all this never ending Fed printing, and the ECB is doing the same thing up at the European Central Bank, Bank of Japan. They're all doing the same thing. They're printing never ending money.
Yeah.
Where's it going? It's going to the corporations, but what are the corporations doing? They're manufacturing stuff. Where's all that stuff going? Because, Main Street's not buying it.
Yeah.
So I think it's being totally manufactured for governments, for continuity of government, sent into wherever they're putting for their, safety spots and hideaway bunker zones underground, like Cheyenne or whatever. It could be anywhere.
Yeah.
But I would think they would have strung it out for at least another 2 years and manufactured as much as they could. But obviously something more powerful is coming, and they're starting to lock everything down now. But maybe that's too outlandish. At least that's my theory, and I'll put it out there.
Wow. So going back to where we started with this is, can we grow enough food?
I don't know. That's what I was asking you.
No,
for sure.
Well, I'm thinking about it, and I guess now that I have more of an idea of the timeline, the other part of the question is for how many and where, because and if I take that into consideration to basically say for everybody, no way. One thing that's been interesting to me, just as sort of an onlooker, watching the world around me change so much during all this COVID nonsense, is how quickly and how effectively everybody jumped. Like the government said jump, and most people said how high, and they just went along with it. And so the scary part of that to me is that it shows that the vast majority of people, though there are a lot of people who have become awake, and there's a lot of them, and I've actually been really surprised and inspired on how many people have woken up recently. However, when I look around, I can see the majority of people are still asleep at the wheel, and they essentially will do anything the government or media tells them to. That to me is more scary than this grand solar minimum, because if I'm left to my own devices, if I'm on a piece of land by myself and my family, I'm confident with the skill set that I have and the people that I know, we could hunker down and make it happen. But to think that there could potentially be a lot of people who are starving and they're going, well, my child is starving and you have something that I need, and the only thing between you and me is a gun. So that is, that's, I don't like to think about that, to be honest, but I have. And so I don't really think that we can save the masses. Just especially seeing what just happened, I don't think it's possible. I think what you're doing um is the real solution, and I'm trying to do the same. I've done the best I can with the resources I have in the area that I'm in, and unfortunately, fortunately for me, I'm in a town where there is not a lot of civil unrest. People are pretty chill here. The nice thing about where I live too is we have a highly skilled population as far as skills that do things. People can fix things. There's a lot of trades guys here. There's a lot of people that know how to live in the bush. Um, it's not like living in a place like Chicago or Los Angeles where you have a bunch of entertainment people or people that work in tech, people that have skills that don't really do anything in tough times. So I'm optimistic with that, but can we save the masses? No. I mean, if everything with what that you're showing with the data is correct, I think we could see a significant part of the population of the world be wiped out really quickly. Not only from the immediate effects of weather and food shortages, combined with all the other radical things that governments are going to do that could exacerbate those.
Think about how far people can drive on a tank of gasoline, because that's all the further they're going to get. Because when these times come, there's not going to be available petrol like there is today, where everybody will have nonstop, go to the next gas station, fill up, go to the next petrol station, fill up. It'll
Yeah,
be
right.
whatever you might only even have half a tank. So you have to think about the average person. They're going to take one of two mind frames. First mind frame would be where you're living, and everybody suddenly wakes up and goes, all right, that's a very scary world out there, or I don't really want to go out and leave my safety net, but I know a lot of the neighbors. And then, suddenly this town of 4,000 people become this cohesive, united unit going, it's way safer here and we got enough skills. And if we all protect each other and if we really defend it, because you see, when people really come out and say, not on my property, people just move out to another place. They go for easier targets unless they're going to be starving, and then they won't care. But for now, and then that second tank of gas, those are the people who are going to be like, I call them the wanderers, where they're just going to like go vroom, and they're going to look at a map and go, looks like there's farms out there.
Let's go there. Yeah.
And just go there. So if you're off a road and then you're down a turn and then you're on a gravel driveway and you're kind of up somewhere, people aren't generally going to go up there and look around because A, they're going to be a little nervous themselves going out there, and they just won't know where to go. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes your best offense is camouflage, where if you're just quiet and lay back, they might even just go right by your place. And, instead of standing out there going, you're not coming on my property, versus going, just hiding back in the bush there. And they would just think it's a gravel logging road or something. And I don't see anything up there. They look around and then they just, how willing are people going to be before they're malnourished and they literally don't have the energy to keep continuing to search and forage and try to find all this? And how far is their tank of gas going to take them? And do they really know where they're going to go?
It's crazy. I mean, just
think
about,
like you gotta simple stuff.
Well, just like down in Tennessee, just think about, your bioregion down there. I mean, you've got in Tennessee, you got a massive city, Memphis, and you got some other cities like Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville. Those are all fairly decent sized cities. But then pull the lens back even further, Atlanta, Indianapolis, St. Louis. I mean, there is a lot of people in that area. The whole eastern seaboard of the United States is when you look at a population map of North America, most of the population's there, and you've got concentrations in the Los Angeles area, Southern California, whatever. Think about all these people in all of those cities trying to get out, like you said, on a half tank of gas at the same time. what's going to happen? It's like every zombie apocalypse movie ever created. You've got, you know what I mean? Like the helicopter fly over, you see hundreds of miles of cars that all ran out of gas at the same area. And so now the main veins that get you out of the city can't go anywhere. It's, it's, yeah, I mean, it's so scary, man. It's just like I don't want to make people fearful. I don't want us to sit here and give people reasons to panic. However, we want people to survive and thrive, right? You and I both. I mean, that's why we do what we do, right? You make these videos to show people something that they should look at, that they can do something about, because we can all do something about this now. Because the shit hasn't hit the fan yet. It looks like it's starting to, but it hasn't really hit the fan yet.
Get some seeds, you know, if you can get the basic prep stuff. And remember, your best idea to understand what's going to happen is look at a history book. And, you know, they go through the tumultuous times, and it's usually like 1 to 2 year period. And then things kind of coalesce, and they, you know, the systems reform after that time. I've never really in history seen where something has broken down for 100 years. It's unthinkable, because people just don't operate in that way.
Yeah.
And everything would have collapsed anyway. Governments would have been gone, you know, like 2 generations in the past, and people would have gone back to bartering or gold and silver. So most times in these kind of reshuffles, if you will, you know, you're looking at a max of like 3 years, maybe at the outset 5 if it's total wipeout. But it generally doesn't get that bad, because people are people and they want to live in comfort and stay alive. They're not going to take themselves willingly down to base 0 where they're eating blades of grass off the ground to stay alive. Nobody's going to put themselves in that situation if they can avoid it.
Yeah.
So think of that about that. And, you know, it is talking about the solutions and the hopefulness that, you know, there's other people out there thinking the same thing, because all this crazy news footage we're seeing right now, you might be thinking to yourself, am I the only one that thinks this way? No, you're not. There's millions of other people that are thinking just like you. So don't be disheartened, and don't be afraid to speak your mind, because, you know, this stuff I've been through, dragged through the mud. And, you know, you talk about the trolls online. For me being unpopular, not agreeing 100% with CO2, when I started to find out after talking with John Casey about the sun and a few other things changing, and then a few other astrophysicists, Piers Corbin and whatnot, those guys over Suspicious Observers, Ben Davidson and their crew over there. And I learned a lot from those guys. You know, they were 50x above me in terms of understanding the whole solar dynamics of everything moving. Once I started to delve into it and do those thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of research myself and making all those videos, it gave me hope that I know I can actually make a difference and do something and take action for my own safety and those around me, that I can do it. But then the most important thing is, there's already the whole other crews of people out there thinking the same thing, that have been doing it for years ahead of you too. So
Yeah.
you're not going to be the only one that's out there. It's now you should try to find your community. And then, you know, it's the mind frame that things can get better. And by knowing this information, instead of being one of those persons that's stuck with half a tank of gas going, I wish I would have known, you're already prepared and you already got it out there, and you're thinking ahead for the possibilities, not in fear and living, you know, in the fear, but understand what may happen and just prepare for it. Like if you live in a hurricane zone, and you think people in Florida, they don't sit there going, oh, there's a hurricane coming this year. There's a hurricane coming this year. But everybody's got water. Everybody's probably got, you know, at least 155-gallon drum of water. They have generators. They have plywood to board up their windows. They don't use it every day, but they're ready when a typhoon comes or a hurricane. And they don't sit there in fear waiting for it. But when it comes, they know, all right, I'm prepped. I'm ready.
Yeah.
You should be the same way. You know these events are coming. Learn how to grow your own food and whatnot. And Curtis, I'll stop there. What about seeds? Where do you think, you know, we can get some seeds? Because I know there's been a few seed suppliers out there that are saying they couldn't get the sunflower seeds, certain types of beets, radishes. They're starting to run out of seed variety types too. So what are you thinking about seeds?
Well, I'm thinking you should have a lot of seed right now. There, you can still buy seeds. I mean, I've seen shortages across the board on a lot of suppliers. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're out because crop failures and all that, though that is part of it. A lot of seed suppliers right now are short because there's just high demand, because people are freaking out and they're going, well, you know, most farmers I know, or a lot of farmers I know, ordered almost twice as much seed as they normally would, just because I did. In fact, I ordered 5 times more seed than I normally would order. And I'm not even commercially farming anymore. I did it just because. So I know I'm not alone there, but yeah, I mean, seeds could be one of the most valuable resources going forward into this. So yes, get your seeds. Um, it's just so interesting with all this, because the other thing that's scary is, like, what happens if you go and you build this homestead and you do all these things, um, and you get taken over, at the end of the day. Because there's kind of two different prepper strategies. I got a buddy. I'm more of a guy like you, where I like to hunker down, develop a piece of land, and make it happen that way. But there's other guys that have this sort of dirt bike and a shotgun, you know, that kind of thing, because that's certainly easier in some ways. It's easier in that you can just go and do it, and you don't have to be so prepared. Whereas, it takes years and time and resources to build a piece of land. And then some guys are saying, well, I'll wait till the shit hits the fan, and then I'll just get on my motorbike and go and rob people. Which, you know, if things are so bad that people just prioritize themselves, then they're going to do that. And so that's where I think, no matter how you look at all this stuff, if you pull the lens back, what you got to realize is that community and people are the greatest resource. People, because we make things happen. As you said, 3-5 years, these things could only last. Historically, we typically start to bounce back from then. That's good to know. That's kind of reassuring. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to think of a way to advise people who might not have the ability, like you and I have, to go and buy a piece of land and do this. I would say to people, it's really important to know your neighbors, because we might get to a point. I mean, at the same time, there's some places that are just better to be than others. If you're in downtown city like Atlanta or Philadelphia, man, there's not a lot you can do there. But in a lot of these suburban towns, like, this is what I live in. I live in a town of about 140,000 people. And that's the majority of towns across the United States. People can, I mean, I've been teaching people to urban farm and urban garden for a long time. There's a lot you can do. The important thing is you really got to band together with your neighbors, and you got to show up with some generosity and some value first, so that they feel like that they want to give something back, and really come together. Because if you're trying to get on the road at the same time as everybody else, you're not getting out. So you might as well say at that point, well, let's make do with what we have here. What can we do? What resources do we have around us? And how can we cooperate with one another and protect one another?
Well, you talked about needing to pull back. Okay, that's fine. If you're in that mind frame too, that if you pull back, then what do you take with you? That skill set that you built that entire farm. Because if I saw you walking down the road, I'd be like, we're protecting him. Everybody go out and grab and make a circle around him. He's coming in because he knows so much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And think about the value that you could provide into a community that maybe there's some people that don't know how to do much. Like if Curtis rocked in and we didn't know how to grow much food, and Curtis showed up at the front door, I'd be like, oh, that was a miracle.
Yeah, right.
Right. Somebody that could do. So imagine like, you don't have anything to like harvest, and somebody knows how to like trim out and use an old, iron horse, and make a scythe out of it, out of a piece of something off a siding or whatever, and you're able to create something that could then go in and do some harvesting. You'd be like, oh, I can't believe this person we couldn't grow anything, now we can harvest it because they were able to use part of a gutter siding to make a blade off a piece of old or a piece of old broom, and we were able to like harvest. And whatever skills you have to kind of DIY stuff too.
Yeah.
And repairing things, I think learning how to repair stuff, although I'm preaching to the choir, I'd need to learn how to do more repairing myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a million things you can learn. And how many free classes are around your area? I mean, for learning how to do a lot of this, any free classes and things around your area? I know you're running classes, but anything around community center stuff?
There isn't, especially with all this COVID stuff going on. That's the thing that's been kind of crazy, is that stuff has been shut down. You can find endless amounts of this stuff online, but what happens if the internet goes down? That's one thing that I think could cause some pandemonium really quickly, especially with all these lockdowns. Because some of these we're not locked down here. We never really were. But people are locked down all over the world, and they're spending all this time at home. Could you imagine if the internet went down, how that could set people off so quickly? It would be crazy. And I wouldn't put it past it. Like it seems like a possibility. I mean, I've been looking at shortage maps on North America of internet shortages, and they've been kind
Mm.
of happening for a while now. I don't know if that's anything you've talked about on your channel, but that's something that people need to consider, that you need to have hard copies of things. You can't just get everything off YouTube and hope that it's going to be there one day. You need to have hard copies. You need to actually have books, survival books, cookbooks. You need to actually have it. You know, there's nothing wrong with data and digital technology, but you got to have hard copies there that you can use, because what happens if the internet goes down?
Yeah, and I made mistakes too this year and burned a bunch of my crop, you know. To see it online and do it is one thing, but to actually practice it and make it work is an entirely different thing. I mean, the people who do it on the net, that do it and make it look easy, have done it 100 times and failed 50% of the time. And then
Yeah.
I can't believe I wiped out my entire shard crop earlier this year. You know, I learned never put the black plastic on it, and then you either put the black plastic and you set your alarm for like 5:30 a.m. to go take it off so the cold weather didn't freeze it overnight and
Yeah.
frost, or you don't do it or you're going to lose your crop. So I mean,
Yeah.
I'll never forget that lesson as long as I live.
It's something that you got to learn in every bioregion. For you guys, it can get so hot so quick that
Super fast. Within minutes, it'll go from pleasant. Like we were out the other day, we were weeding and we were putting some mulch down to try to keep the weeds down in the area. It went from very pleasant to so scalding hot that we started breathing heavy and instantly sweat within 5 minutes. It was that much of a transition to where I'm like, whoa, I just got so hot out here. And
yeah,
it does
yeah,
that in the
yeah.
mornings. Yeah.
Yeah, and in Tennessee too. I mean, those rains you guys get are biblical. I've never seen rain like that anywhere up here. I don't know if it exists like that down there. So much rain so quickly can wipe everything out. Mother Nature is a bitch. She can
And
come
she
in.
gives.
She
She's a
gives too.
caregiver and a giver, endless bounty giver, but she'll take it away.
She'll take it away real quick. So yeah, well, hey, David, this has been a great conversation. We covered a lot of stuff there. I really encourage my viewers to go and check your stuff out. Tell us a little bit about where they can find out about you online and what's the best place to go.
You can start at the Adapt 2030 channel, and thanks for the kind words that you found enough value, at least to what I'm talking about, to share it with others. And me too. When I find somebody, and I never recommend anything that I don't personally believe it has value, because there's so little time and there's so little money for us to get things ready. So, if you're talking to people, it's got to be the best. But Adapt 2030, and where I talk about a lot of these things, so you can see how the media is not really forthcoming with all the changes and how things are being manipulated now for the distraction. I try to really intertwine the economy along with what we've been talking about here with the change of the climate, and also just the human factor inside it all, because it's going to take all three, and all three are changing kind of intersyncly here. So I try to cover all of that, because another terrifying thing would be is if they take down not only the net, but your access to use your ATM card. Like, what would you do without money? So I think this is going to be part of the play inside, is resetting the currency in this too. So if you like this type of talk, go to the Adapt 2030 channel on YouTube. I did do more of my podcast when I had more time, but I'm spending so much time, actually out getting things done, that I just don't have time for the podcast. And I'll try to transition it from a YouTube video into a podcast, but to kind of focus that's not growing me food. I'm not learning by doing a podcast. So basically the Patreon channel at Adapt 2030, or the Adapt 2030 YouTube channel. And you and I don't know how much longer we're going to be up here, because the things we talk about are, well, they're not super outrageous at the moment, but you see how many 1,200 channels got wiped out last week.
I know.
Brighteon and BitChute, those are the other ones too, those alternative channels with Mike Adams channels over there, Brighteon and then BitChute, both on the Adapt 2030. And the website, I forgot my website, oilseedcrops.org. That's oil like a barrel of oil, seed as in a seed you can plant in the ground, and crops, plural, CROPS, that you can harvest.org. I take every single video, and I have an assistant that works with me. And that video is then taken into, we take the transcript out and we insert all the slides and we make it into a PDF and a post. So the reason I'd spend the time to do that extra maneuver there is I want you to have the information in a printed form so you can email, you can share, you can screen grab, you can keep the charts, you can explain it to somebody else. Because everything you saw on that slide roll there was things from previous posts that I'd done videos about.
Amazing.
And see, I was able to keep those and put them in a sort of a story format. And I was hoping that other people could do the same thing. So I really went out of my way, and I still do every single video.
Wow.
To take the time to pay somebody to put it into that format, so you have the PDF and you have the written, and you can save it, pass it along, because history is going to be rewritten during this time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when we come to like 2035, what we know now is going to be rewritten for sure.
Yeah.
They'll come out and say, well, we were telling everybody about the grand solar minimum. No, you weren't. You were saying it was all CO2 and pay a global tax, and if we stopped doing this, it would not. Come on. But you can see the direction they're going to rewrite history. So
yes. Wow.
be
That's
one of the ones that can correct it.
Absolutely. What an incredible resource. So thanks so much for doing this, David. I really appreciate it. I'd love to have a conversation again another time. And yeah, good luck on the farm, man.
Yeah, and when you're out to Tennessee, you got to come on out. We'll I'll bring you up when we get to the top of the mountain and get some look over the Smoky Mountains, and good views, and we'll check out the veggies. Get the fruit garden going too, that whole berry garden going.
I'd love to, anytime. Doesn't look like I'll be traveling anytime soon though, so we'll see.
Thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Awesome, brother.